Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Karmic Gacha system in Modern Family World. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 271, College Experience Part 3. Edward POV. As Abed and I climbed down the rope and entered the forgotten, restricted area of the Greendale Computer Department, he turned to me with a curious look. Mind giving me some information about our quest? I shone my flashlight around, taking note of the agents blocking the entrance to the lounge room, ensuring our privacy. I'm searching for Russell Borkert's treasure, I began, launching into an exposition. He's a computer genius and millionaire who got rich by inventing the 9-track cassette. Supposedly, the 8-track industry paid him to keep quiet about it, and he funneled that wealth into founding Greendale as a computer school. I chuckled. Though it's strange that you all don't actually teach any computer courses here. Abed quipped, it's labeled Computery College. I thought that they teach things related to computers. But now you mentioned it, it is indeed odd. Shaking my head, I replied, it seems there was a time when the college was filled with technological innovations. As we walked through the corridors, I could see traces of where computers used to be and even a research lab. Abed said, anyway, back to Russell Borkert. Oh, right. He obsessively pursued a new project, a machine that can process feelings. He apparently used nothing but gold to assemble his circuitry, believing it to be a better conductor for human emotion. I'm quite interested in the tech, so let's see if we can find it. I added. I continued giving Abed some exposition. Rumors spread about Russell Borkert's unnatural relationship with computers. So much so, that people even thought he died from a computer virus. An STD computer virus. But he actually just went underground and continued his research here. The first Greendale dean was so embarrassed by Russell's quirks that he sealed off the entire computer department to prevent another Russell incident. Abed asked while in character, are you here in search of the gold circuit? Is that the treasure? I turned to him and said, I'm not. Also, I'm not planning to break the robot. Abed was confused, then, what are you aiming for here? I smirked and said, you'll understand it when the time comes. We reached the end of the corridor into another lounge. There was a jukebox there, placed in front of what obviously was a hidden room. I checked the surroundings and found several baseball cards. Why are you picking them up? Abed asked curiously. A friend of mine is collecting baseball cards. I can give it to him. I replied casually. Little did Abed and I know, these vintage baseball cards from the 70s in mint condition were really valuable. One of these could pay for Abed's entire college fees, and I got 40 of them. Abed checked the jukebox and said, I'm sure one of them is the key to opening the secret door. Try track 127. I muttered. Abed checked the track's name and said, of course. Open the door by Secret Doors. The key couldn't be even more obvious. The jukebox rumbled and started playing the song. The jukebox moved inside the walls, opening a secret path to Russell Borkert's lab. I expected to see the inventor there, that's why I told Abed I wasn't going to take the gold circuits. Russell's entire life's work was to build a robot girlfriend, and taking that gold out of his robot would basically kill the love of his life, however clunky it may be. My aim in this treasure hunt was to trade with Russell some technologies. I'm pretty sure I could just connect him to the internet and he would be glad to give me his money. This is the greatest thing that has ever happened in my life, Abed muttered in amazement as the door finished opening. I chuckled and said, stick closely with me. I asked him to do that because I was expecting a feral Russell Borkert there. However, I wasn't worried about him because right now, he would be a 70-year-old man, and he had never once exercised in his entire life. I could take him down easily if I had to. The room was filled with analog servers, which reminds me of the Zola scene in Captain America Winter Soldier. As we entered the room, Abed and I were both shocked when we saw a human skeleton laying on the floor of the lab. "Oh my God," I muttered with disbelief. "This isn't supposed to happen." My voice shook as I examined the corpse. "He's supposed to be alive." Abed was also disturbed by it and said, "That corpse. Maybe Russell Borkert." My words stopped as I suddenly smelled something strange. "Abed. Hold your breath and retreat immediately. The room is filled with gas." Abed was startled and he covered his nose instantly. Both of us rushed back to the jukebox, and we closed the secret passage behind us. Breathing heavily, Abed said, "Gas? Are you sure?" "I didn't smell anything." "I'm sure of it. Whatever the gas is, I'm pretty sure that was the thing that killed Mr. Borkert." "What should we do now?" Abed asked. "Do we end our adventure here?" Shaking my head, I said, "No. We just need a gas mask." Luckily for me, I brought it with me when I came to Colorado. But what?" Abed asked urgently. I scratched my cheek and said, "I left it behind in my apartment." Abed nodded and said, "It's okay. I don't think there's anyone else who knows about the treasure's existence." Abed suddenly stumbled, and his knees were weakened. I grabbed him from falling down and asked, "Abed, are you okay?" Suddenly feel quite dizzy," Abed said. "My head feels very heavy." "The gas. You've inhaled quite a lot of it," I said as I felt my head throbbing too. I carried Abed by his shoulder and walked him toward the exit. I called the agents and one of them climbed down through the trapdoor. "Take him to the hospital. Quick," I ordered. He inhaled some gas. "I don't know what kind." "What about you, sir?" the agent asked me with concern. "I'm fine," I said. I took out a canister from my pocket and took out 2 nostril filters from it before plugging it into my nose. I didn't want to take it out before because that meant I would be the only one who could adventure inside the room, but right now, it would be better for me to do this alone. After equipping the filters, I ventured back into the secret lab to find the source of the gas. From my inspection, I figured out that one of the gas pipes he used for heating his secret lab had burst. In my rough estimate, it has been 5 years since Russell Borkert died there, alone, without anyone realizing it. I searched for the main pipeline and turned off the gas. That's a harsh way to go. I thought before grabbing a duffel bag filled with cash stowed under the desk. At the very least, I can have this. I checked the content of the bag. I was confused at first when I saw that it was filled to the brim with $100 bills. Didn't he say that it was Gerard Ford dollars? I was expecting to see a fake currency here, but the money was quite real. When I thought about it, I realized that I had misunderstood it. In the TV series, Russell Borkert meant that it was cash from the Gerard Ford era. Because of the rapid inflation in the 70s, Russell thought that the cash was worthless, which it would have been if the rate of inflation stayed the same as it was in the 70s. That's why he gave it to the school so easily. The duffel bag was 86L in size. From my rough calculation, 5,186.7 cubic inches of the bag size, divided by 0.069 inches of the $100 bills, should be around $75,166 bills inside the bag, which amounted to $7.52 million. For taking your money, I'll give you a proper burial. You can rest easy knowing that your dreams have come true. I clasped my hand together as I prayed for the deceased man. That's when I saw the skeleton holding a note in his grasp. As I was curious, I pried the piece of paper from his hand, and found out that it was Russell's dying will. The note said, "My time is short. If you find this, you found my body. My cocaine habit has gotten the better of me, killing my body at a fast rate. For the discoverer, I leave you all my possessions. This includes my home and all my tech and engineering equipment, including all of my wealth. I also leave you the deed to Greendale College. I have a dream that one day, technology would be available to the masses. I hope that you can carry on that dream for me. Most importantly, I leave you my robot companion. Her name is Raquel. She is the embodiment of my life's work and the love of my life. Please care for her. Allow her to continue living on my behalf. This is my final wish. I entrust my life's work to you. Use it wisely. Let my robot in college carry on my legacy. Farewell. Russell Borkert. From his handwriting, it seemed that Russell Borkert wrote this in a hurry. He might have thought that his body's deterioration was due to his cocaine habit in the 80s, unaware of the gas leak. After reading the will, I hesitated for a bit. His dream of making advanced technology accessible had already been fulfilled, so I had no obligations on that front. However, caring for the 8-foot-tall robot was too much for me. I'd rather just melt down the circuits to get the gold rather than transferring it back into my lab. Wait. Why am I stressed out about it? It's a robot. I just need to copy the codes, I thought. There were 15 old servers connected to the main robot. I grabbed a USB and created a hub to connect to the servers before copying everything inside. Then, I started to break down the robot, took every single piece of gold, and left the secret lab. For Russell Borkert's burial, a few of my agents would take care of that later on. First, I sent a copy of the will to Harvey, asking her to verify its legitimacy. After confirmation, I changed the name on the deed from Russell Borkert to my own, which meant I immediately became Greendale's vice dean. Melt down the gold and sell it. Also, put this all into my bank account, I instructed one of my bodyguards. Since the money was willed to me, I needed to pay inheritance tax to legalize it, which meant I had to pay around 15% of the total wealth to the state. Checking the Colorado inheritance tax rates, I found that the inheritor only needed to pay 8% of the total wealth inherited. After selling the gold, I received an additional $12 million, bringing the total inheritance to $20 million. I had to pay $1.6 million in inheritance tax to the state. All of this was settled in just 3 hours since Abed and I started the adventure. As the company and the legal team I created were all hired based on efficiency, all of the work was done in a record amount of time. I went to the hospital to check on Abed after burying Russell. He was already back to his normal self, laying down on the hospital bed, with one of my bodyguards guarding the door to his ward. I threw him a stack of $100 bills I grabbed from the bag and said, "Here, for your medical expenses." Abed didn't react for a second before he picked up the cash and politely gave it back to me. "It's fine. I'm just following along in the adventure. The loot is all yours. You're the one who did all of the research. I have no claims in it." I scoffed and said, "Just take it. This is compensation for the danger you faced. Rather than money, can I get another form of compensation? Maybe a favor?" Abed asked. "What do you want? A theme song?" I chuckled. Then, Abed nodded, which made me incredulous. "You really want a theme song?" "It's important for a good show to have their own theme song," Abed said while snapping his finger. All right then. Sure. Still, take the money. You need some to cover your medical insurance." Abed smiled and said, "Okay." He suddenly said, "I thought you're going to be like Jay Gatsby, but you're more like Tony Stark." "'Cause I'm devilishly handsome and incredibly smart?" I joked. Abed replied, "No, because you hide your kind personality behind a facade." I was taken aback for a second before I changed the topic. "By the way, who did you put down as your guardian?" "You can already be discharged, you just need someone to sign the release form." Even I couldn't do that on his behalf considering I'm not an adult. "If you want, I can ask one of my guards to do it for you," I offered. "My dad. But he cannot close his falafel shop. So I have already called Britta. She'll be arriving soon." Abed replied. "I'll keep you company till she arrives," I said. Abed became excited and asked, "What should we talk about? The Batman movies? I know you like Batman. You mentioned it a few times in your livestream. I don't know what else you like." Let's see. Have you watched One Piece before? I asked in reply. Abed shook his head and said, I heard about it, but I cannot find a good source to watch the show. You should watch it soon. It's a masterpiece. I chuckled. Abed said, I'll decide that on my own. Abed suddenly got into another topic. Remember that I told you about changing the show's setting before? Yeah. I remember. I replied casually. After seeing what used to be Greendale's Glory Day, and their hidden history, do you still feel the same way? I asked. Abed shook his head and said, not at all. The exposition of the rich background was told in the beginning of the first season, so it'll subconsciously plant some seeds into the audience, thinking that this is a show for the college to gain their prestige back. So it doesn't matter if the setting changes now. That's reaching. But, it does make sense? I replied hesitantly. Since the show is focusing on our study group, I don't think it really matters. Abed added. It's just that the college improvement won't change the dynamic of the show anymore. Maybe, it'll even create a few interesting episodes. Abed suddenly said, you might think I'm weird as I kept referring to the college as a TV show. I'm not thinking that. I replied. Abed was confused, really? Why? He looked at me as if I was the weird one. 'Cause, I can see it too, I guess? I chuckled. In fact, I feel a connection. I replied honestly. Abed was silent for a while. In his entire life, it was the first time for him to meet someone who understood what he was saying. In fact, I'd been in 5 of them. I leaned in and whispered. 5 shows. Abed gasped in shock and asked excitedly, what are the 4 other shows? I know that you won't be able to tell their names, so just tell me what the show is like. I counted with my fingers, a mockumentary-style dramedy that follows the lives of an extended family with unique personalities and relationships, Modern Family. A comedy that centers on a group of socially awkward scientists and their interactions with a hot neighbor, The Big Bang Theory. A sitcom that follows the misadventures of 2 young waitresses trying to start a cupcake business while dealing with the challenges of living in New York City on a tight budget, 2 broke girls. And lastly, a sitcom that follows the antics and investigations of a talented but quirky group of NYPD detectives in the 99th Precinct, Brooklyn 99. Abed said with excitement, all of them have the making of a good story? Although some of them would work better if they have a laugh track. I know, right? I muttered with the same excitement. Abed and I bonded over our worldviews for a while. We talked non-stop for about 2 hours, mostly about TV shows. Abed suddenly muttered, although I'm glad that we're building a connection, my mind kept wondering where Britta might be. She's really late. That's true. Let me check. I said before I walked to the door, opened it, and asked the agent standing guard there. Did a blonde girl named Britta come by yet? The agent nodded and said, she did. She signed the release form and left. Huh? Why didn't she come inside? I asked in confusion. The bodyguard avoided his eyes, which made me realize he had something to do with it. What did you do? I asked sternly. You were having a moment with the patient. I don't want her to disturb it and send her away. The bodyguard replied. She doesn't seem to be pleasant. I don't want her to ruin the mood. Baffled at first, I asked with narrowed eyes, your name is Mickey, right? Yes. Wait, are you firing me? Mickey asked, flustered. No, you're promoted. I said, turning him speechless. From now on, you're going to be the head of my personal security. I returned to Abed after grabbing the release form, leaving the guy alone to process what just happened. Suddenly, I heard him shout from behind the door, thank you, SIR. I won't let you down. What was that? Abed asked curiously. I replied, nothing, I just promoted him. Anyway, Abed, you can go home now. I'm going back to college to pick up Frankie. I can drive you. Okay, sure. Thank you. On the road, you can talk about your own show, and I'll give you advice on how to improve it. The show I'm working on? I asked with a quizzical expression. Abed replied, no, your show. The show where you're the main star. I have a show. I replied in surprise. No, I don't have a show, Abed. My life story is too boring to have my own show. I'll be the one to decide that. Abed said decisively. I thought about it for a while and said, what the hell? As long as we're leaning into this, might as well. General POV. While in the meeting with the school board members Richie and Carl, Frankie got a text from Edward and excused herself from the meeting. Then, she called Edward in confusion and asked, when did you forge a dead man's will? I didn't. I actually found his corpse underneath the school campus. Edward replied in disbelief. I told you I was treasure hunting. He added. Frankie thought about it and said, well, since you got the deed, it'll make the negotiation easier. Frankie, can I ask you a favor? Edward interjected. Frankie asked, what do you want me to do? It seems that the wealth of the deceased men is much bigger than I thought. Edward muttered. Rather than letting the city get the investment, what if? They talked about it for a while, and Frankie finally cut the call. She re-entered the room and sat down on the table. Both of the city reps were still smiling, expecting good news. Dean Pelton smiled sadly behind the glass door, peering into the meeting room with a look of longing. He was thrown out of the negotiation by the school board because of the eccentric ways he was acting. Gentlemen, let's cut the meeting short. Frankie said with a serious tone, causing the smile to vanish from the city reps' faces. I was only here for a day, and I have to convince Edward to stop the investment from happening. Frankie continued. Both of the city reps were shocked. Wait? Why? The school financially was in dire straits, so not getting the investment was a huge deal to everyone there. Let me give you a rundown on why I did that. Frankie took out a list and read them out loud. The facilities are crumbling, black mold, faulty wiring, coyotes and other animals running rampant on campus. The power goes out constantly, and they don't even have a proper fire alarm system. Not to mention the building structure and overlooked issues. It's a liability nightmare waiting to happen. The money can fix that. Richie said nervously while pulling his collar. Frankie continued without minding him, half of the faculty are drunk and they don't even want to be here. Not to mention, frauds. Your dean hired the Spanish teacher because he thought it'd be racist for him to ask him about his credentials, which is none by the way. There's a marijuana farm growing in the lab, which made this entire place complicit in the police matter. Frankie added. Lastly, the administration. The place is run by a revolving door of half-competent bureaucrats, and I was being generous. I'm shocked they haven't been sued into oblivion already. Frankie placed down the list and said, do you guys have anything to say in defense to what I figured out? Richie said angrily, all right. We get it. Frankie commented, not only for us, but even the city will be liable the longer you try to keep the college running. Just imagine the PR disaster. City Council is using Greendale Community College as a marijuana farm? Carl turned to Richie and said, the school is in a really bad shape. Richie said to Carl, I guess that's what happens when you use the time you were supposed to check on the administration to eat chicken wings and drink beer. Gentlemen, I pity you guys. Frankie said with a sympathetic tone, which made both Richie and Carl calm down a bit. Richie said, it's fine, Miss Dart. We're the one at fault here. I understand that your company cannot invest in the college because of the liability issue, and it cannot be associated with the college either because of the potential fallout from the drug case. Frankie nodded and said, gentlemen, I understand the difficult position this puts you in. If I were you, I'd cut off the institution like a gangrenous limb, saving the city council from the potential backlash it could cause. Carl said in frustration, we want to, but we can't. Richie added, we wanted to sell this place a long time ago. But we couldn't find any buyer. If the city closes down the place on our own, there'll be backlash. If we don't, we can incur more problems. Frankie pretended to think and said, there's one more solution you can try. But I'll forget it, I don't think it can happen. Both of the city reps asked urgently, please tell us. You can get rid of the institution for cheap. Our company can offer the city to buy out the institution and close it down for you. That way, we'll be the one who'd bear the brunt of the backlash. Frankie said. She added with a caring, yet difficult tone, but, you understand why I don't think this can happen. The risk is too great. Unless the price is really, really low, then, I don't think that I can convince the management to take that risk. If anything, we can just sell the land and the property to recover the money after shutting down the college. We won't lose that much in this transaction. You want us to sell the college, to you? Richie couldn't believe his ears. Carl suddenly shouted, sold. We can go as low as $3 million for the entire thing. He stood up and offered a handshake to Frankie. Deal. Frankie stood up and shook his hand immediately. The property alone was worth more than $2.5 million. Richie looked at Frankie and Carl with disbelief before he shook his head and said, well, it's too late to back out now. Bring the sale contract tomorrow. We'll transfer the money and handle the problem for you. Frankie said before she left the room. She passed by the dean as she got out of the room, and he asked excitedly, did you guys come to an agreement? Yes. Frankie smiled kindly at the dean, making him misunderstand the situation. She wanted to leave, but when she had already taken a few steps away from the dean, she stopped and slowly backtracked towards him. Remembering what Edward told her about the dean being a level 6 susceptible, it could be damaging to the plan if he was left alone. Frankie asked him, I wonder if there's a place here I could stay in and watch TV? The dean became excited, oh, come with me. I'll show you where I usually take my afternoon break. Chapter 272, College Experience Part 4. General POV. Frankie watched the movie Shark Tales with Dean Pelton as she waited for Edward to come back. However, while they were watching it, Britta and Jeff burst into the room unannounced and started to confront Frankie. Hey, what did your people do with Abed? Jeff asked. Dean Pelton yelped and flinched, his entire popcorn dropped to the ground. Jeffrey! Are you insane? Dean Pelton admonished him immediately, waiting to push Jeffrey out of the room. However, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move the muscular man. Whoa, hold on. What seems to be the situation here? Frankie asked casually, not intimidated at all. Britta appeared from behind Jeffrey and accused, I'm talking about Abed Nadir. He was admitted to the hospital, but your security wouldn't let me inside. When I came back with Jeff, he was gone. Are you sure he didn't just go back to his dorm? Dean Pelton asked as he kept his hand on Jeffrey's chest. We've checked, and get your hand off me, Jeff said as he replied to the dean. He pushed Dean's hand away, twice. Britta added, what are you doing to him? Is the conspiracy theory true? What conspiracy theory? Frankie asked in confusion. Britta replied, that Entertain is actually a shady corporation hiding behind the face of an entertainment agency. They even did experiments on chicken eggs. An anonymous source posted it. Jeff was startled and asked worriedly, what are you doing to my source of protein? Frankie was incredulous and slowly, she pointed her finger to the door, is that your friend? Britta grimaced, don't try to trick us, wait, Abed? As she followed the finger, she noticed Abed standing there with a hidden figure who hid his face underneath a baseball cap, both were slurping a drink. Sorry we're late. We stopped by 7-Eleven to get some IC. Abed said casually after everyone was looking at him. Edward added, we combined all the different colors into one. Abed explained, we wanted to see if all of our teeth would change colors like they did in cartoons, but we only got a brain freeze. Were you guys watching Shark Tales together? Edward? Really? You did that? Frankie asked with an excited expression. Edward grimaced and said, calm down. I was just swept up by his rhythms. Abed said to Frankie, he brought it up. We're good friends now. We bonded by our mutual interest in TV and movies. Jeff and Britta were in disbelief. Edward looked to the floor and said, "Huh." He did pass out. All of the people there looked at where he was looking, and saw Dean Pelton fainting on the ground. When he saw Edward, he gasped in shock, even suffocating himself before he passed out. "Dean!" Britta immediately rushed to the dean. She said, "We need to get him to a hospital. Or you can just let him wake up on his own." Annie did the same thing. Abed said, "So, leave him be?" Jeff asked casually. Frankie, Edward, Abed and Jeff walked out of the room without even caring about the dean. Britta shouted, "You heartless monsters." Edward chuckled and asked one of the undercover security agents around him to go and help. Britta rejoined the group soon after and said egregiously to Edward, "Thank you." Was that so hard to do? Before Frankie could, Abed defended Edward. "He might seem like he's callous, but he cares about people. He won't abandon the dean even if you weren't there." Frankie was taken aback a bit and supported Abed. "He's right. So, what did you guys do until you had to go to a hospital?" Britta asked with concern. Abed replied, "We went adventuring in a forgotten part of Greendale and suddenly found ourselves in a trap room. I inhaled some gas, so he had to carry me to safety." Edward nodded as if to back Abed's words as Abed spoke to Britta. Britta snorted and said, "If you don't want to tell me, there's no need to make stuff up." "Abed, did you?" Jeff hinted at Abed as they met each other's eyes. Edward caught it and spoke to Jeff, "Pitch me your movie idea?" "Sorry, but the plot line wasn't that great. It's a great story. You just can't appreciate good art." Jeff replied angrily. Edward and Abed both had a deadpan look and muttered, "Seriously?" Britta snorted and teased, "Jeff, you tried to sell him your movie rights? Shut up and go read more conspiracy theories online." Jeff snapped to Britta. Edward chimed in, "You know there's one about me being born in a US military experiment to create the next generation of super soldiers. That one is a great read." Jeff asked, "Those things don't bother you?" "Not really, no." Edward replied casually. Abed suddenly said, "Ed, if you have some time, can I bring you to meet Annie? She made me promise to tell her if I see you again." "Is she still here?" Edward asked casually. Britta replied, "Yes. She has some late classes." Jeff said as he wrapped his arm around Edward, "Why don't I bring you there, and we can talk about my movie idea? I have a couple if you don't like that one." However, a security guard bigger than him grabbed his arm and twisted it. "Ow!" Jeff shouted in pain. Edward said, "Oh, sorry about that. I told them not to act unless there's physical touch. You can release him. He's fine." Edward explained to Jeff before telling the guard to be at ease. Britta admonished Jeff, "You really thought he's an ordinary kid, didn't you? He was so casual, I kinda did." Jeff confessed. "Sorry about that." He apologized to Edward. Frankie suddenly pulled Abed away from the group while everything was happening and asked Abed, "Hey, you said you became good friends with him?" Abed replied, "Yeah. We have a similar thought process. It made us bond pretty quickly." Frankie suddenly turned to Edward and said, "Hey Ed, I forgot my tablet, so why don't you go and meet with that pretty girl in yellow sweater, and Abed will accompany me back to the room." Edward pointed at Frankie and said, "I feel that there's something more going on there, but I'll just pretend to be tricked." As the group separated into two, Edward turned to Britta, "I have to ask, did you used to be an activist? More specifically, the group that broke out the animals from the laboratory testing and saved a Capuchin monkey." Britta looked proud and said, "I did. Just before I go to Greendale. I can't believe you know about it. Sometimes, it is worth fighting for a cause." She gave Jeff a smug look. Jeff snorted and said, "Britta, what if he has some stakes in the company? Then, he can use your confession to get you arrested." "Don't worry. I don't. But I know about that monkey." "When you saved him, did you get bitten or scratched by it?" Edward asked casually. Both Britta and Jeff furrowed their eyebrows. Britta said, I did get scratched, but only a little bit. Jeff took a step away from Britta and said, why did you ask? Was the monkey diseased? Thank God nothing happened between us yet. Wait, we kissed. Damn it, Britta. Did you spread a disease to me? Edward slurped his IC and said, there's no disease. Both of them breathed in relief, but widened their eyes again when Edward continued, but the monkey carried a chemical compound that could induce mental disorder. It will be a slow descent to insanity for those who got bitten or scratched by it. What? Britta yelled in shock after processing the information in deathly silence for a minute. Poor woman. Edward shook his head sympathetically to Britta, which made Jeff think that he wasn't kidding about it. After the group's separation and making sure that Edward was out of earshot, Frankie asked Abed, so you're bonded to Edward from your mutual interest in TV, right? That's an oversimplification, but yes. Abed replied. Frankie said, alright, I have a question. If someone famous says that the reason he couldn't move on from a girl is within the Shark Tale movie, what is he talking about? Frankie was actually a bit nervous about asking Abed the question even though she had veiled it, fearing that he could manage to figure out that someone was Edward. However, she was worried for nothing. Abed replied, he's famous? There's a few scenes in Shark Tales that might make him relate, but if I have to guess, it should be the scene where Angie told Oscar she loved him even before he was a nobody. Before the money and fame. In the fake lives he was living, her love was the only thing that's real. And he missed that when he was busy chasing his dream. Oh. Frankie was taken aback for a bit. She thought about the matter and mumbled, so, I guess the reason he's holding on is because she knew him before he got famous? Abed replied, that depends. Were they in love before? Also, is he a fish? I don't, what? Frankie looked at Abed in confusion, trying to figure out if he was joking in that last question. Thank you. Frankie said afterward. Abed replied, you're welcome, and then walked away. Frankie muttered with exasperation, Edward's new best friend is kinda weird. In California, Jacob abruptly stood up from the couch, confusing his family members. His mother asked, what's wrong, honey? Something's wrong. I can feel it. It's like I'm being robbed of something, he muttered solemnly. Edward POV. Jeff asked me in panic, can you do something? Are you sure that she's going to go insane? I slurped my IC and said, I don't know. If I want to do something about it, I need to know what the chemical is. So do a blood test. Jeff urged. Britta nodded with a pale face and said, I don't want to be insane. I thought about it for a while. The duo anxiously waited for my verdict as I was silent. Then, I replied, blood test won't work, so, get me the monkey. I'll study it right from the source. You want me to capture the monkey I had liberated? Britta asked in disbelief. You don't really liberate him. I guess you send him to a pet shop or something. If you really release him back to the wild, then he'll die in days. Britta widened her eyes and said, I did send him to a shop. Then? Go get him. I gestured with my eyes. Jeff said to Britta, you should go now before the shops close. I'll stick with him so that you will know where he is. You just want to pitch your ideas to him. Britta said angrily. Jeff replied, no. I'm not that obnoxious. I know when to quit. Fine. I'll go now. Britta sighed before she left in a jiffy. Now, let's get you to meet Annie. By the way, are you interested in getting a rare comic book for your comic book collection? I replied casually, I don't have a comic book collection. But if you want to sell some rare stuff, I know a group of nerds that may buy it. What comic is it? Spider-Man. Jeff replied simply. I shot him a look and said, issue number? Which writer? What year? I'll have to check. Jeff said. Then, both of us saw the yellow sweater girl walking towards us. There's Annie. You talk to her. I'll be back with the comic details. He ran away to his car to get his precious asset, leaving me alone there, without even trying to introduce me to Annie. Well, this is awkward. I muttered in disbelief after realizing I was left alone in the hallway. Annie moved closer and closer. I stood still in the hall, trying to say something to her, but she just walked right past me? Is my disguise that good? I reacted incredulously after Annie disappeared at the end of the hallways. Then, I shrugged and said, oh well. I walked to my car, and then left the college grounds after Frankie returned. What about the girl? Frankie asked in confusion. She doesn't recognize me, so I left. Don't want to embarrass myself. I replied. Really? Frankie asked with a surprise, even though she saw you in the morning? I nodded as I thought the entire thing was bizarre too. I even wear the same outfit. Anyway, what's going on with the negotiation? We already got a deal. Tomorrow morning, you'll be the new owner of this community college. Frankie replied with a smile. I know I can count on you, mother figure. I smirked. You know what? I like that nickname. Frankie said teasingly. On another topic, I've watched Shark Tales. She said suddenly, which made my heart beat a bit quicker. Is this the right time to tell you that I didn't think you'll actually watch it this early, so I'm quite nervous right now? I said meekly. Mind if we wait until the end of the trip to get into the convo, or like, not ever? Frankie smiled kindly at me before she replied, no. General POV. As Jeff went to his car, he found out that it was being towed. Wait. That's my house. He shouted as he ran after the towing truck. He managed to stop the driver and begged him, please sir, that's my car. I was only parking there because I lost my friend and went to confront the guys I thought had him, but it was all a misunderstanding. Sorry man. I can't do anything about it, even if you have good intentions. The driver said while smoking. You can get your car back from the impound lot tomorrow. Once a tow truck has hooked up a car and started driving away, the tow company is generally required to complete the tow and take the vehicle to the designated impound lot. But I'll need to pay a fine, and I don't have any money on me right now. Jeff explained. I feel bad for you, man, but I really can't do anything. The driver shook his head apologetically. You can grab your stuff in there if you want. I'll give you 5 minutes. Jeff sighed and said, thank you. He went to his car and filled a backpack with his stuff before letting the tow truck leave. He gazed at the sight of his car leaving with despair when Annie came to find him. Jeff. I've been chasing after you. Did you find Abed? And is that your car being towed? Annie asked incredulously. Jeff looked at Annie in bewilderment. Why aren't you with him? With who? Annie asked in confusion. Jeff widened his eyes and mumbled, no. Damn it. That was my last chance. He rushed back into the building despite Annie calling him. Jeff. Annie turned in disbelief, and then mumbled, with who? Jeff searched for Edward for a while before finally giving up. He went to find Abed, knocked on Abed's dorm room and asked, hey, my car got towed. Can I stay here tonight? Abed was surprised, but he agreed to it easily, yeah. Cool. I've always wanted a roommate. You want the top or the bottom bunk? Top. Jeff replied. Me too. I'll race you for it. Abed said before he ran to the bunk bed and jumped to the top bed. I win. He said. Jeff didn't even move when he started the competition. Suddenly, Annie appeared on the dorm room door and scolded Jeff, I swear if you run off one more time. Abed looked at Annie and asked, hey, why are you here? Why can't I be here? Annie asked in bewilderment while flailing her arms around. Someone please give me some context. Abed, you want to take this one? I feel kinda bad. Jeff said as he looked at Abed. Sure. Abed replied. Then, he looked at Annie and said, we met with Edward Newgate, your celebrity crush. Jeff and Britta were supposed to be bringing him to meet you. I don't know what happened next. Jeff realized that Abed didn't know the full story and added, "Wait. Sorry. I should explain from now on." On our way over, we found out that Britta is criminally insane, so she needs to track down a Capuchin monkey so that they can make drugs to save her mind. Annie was befuddled. What? Anyway, I told Newgate about a rare comic book I have. And he was ready to open up his wallet to buy it from me. I saw you were coming in our direction, so I just left to go and get it. I didn't know that you're going to follow me. Jeff added. Annie froze for a while before she laughed dryly. Ha. Annie? Abed was confused. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Annie began to laugh madly and said, I walked past him? Even when he's coming to meet me? I'm like, the worst fan in the world. Jeff began to get worried. Annie, by any chance, were you bitten by a monkey? Please tell me the context about the monkey. I feel like there's a story I'm missing here. Abed turned to Jeff and asked. Annie laughed madly, however, she stopped abruptly when Abed turned to her and said, If you want, I can text him. See if he's coming here again. Jeff and Annie looked at Abed in disbelief. Annie asked with a shaky voice, You have his phone number? Jeff asked, You exchanged numbers with him? I told you. We're great friends. Abed replied casually. Call him, tell him I got the comic. Jeff said urgently. Abed said, I'll just text him. As soon as Edward and Frankie arrived at the apartment, he reacted incredulously, You want me to do what? Frankie replied decisively, Ask a girl out on a date. Even if it's just one date. Frankie's commentary. I've come to see why he was so crestfallen when that budding romance of his fell apart. In his world of fame and celebrity, he feels he can't truly connect with people anymore. Frankie commented from Edward's seaside villa living room. He worries that any relationships he tries to build now will always be colored by the public's perception of him, so he clings to the people who know him before his fame. Frankie added. I understand why he feels that way. It must be so hard to trust that anyone sees the real him, and not just the polished persona. But I worry that in shutting himself off to avoid getting hurt, he may miss out on finding the true connections he craves. If he locks himself away from the world, how will he ever meet someone who can see past the celebrity facade? That's why I'm asking him to date. So that he may open his mind about it. Commentary ends. Chapter 273, New Owner and a Date. Edward POV. A new day arrived at Greendale, and it was the last day of school before the Thanksgiving break. Knowing the potential backlash if the college buyout was done publicly, the city representative and Frankie signed the contract first before announcing the decision to the college administration. What do you mean? Dean Pelton was flabbergasted when he heard the news as he was invited to the signing event in the city office. Carl and Richie gloated when they saw Dean Pelton's confused expression. Richie said, From now on, Greendale Community College will no longer be part of the city's management. You guys have been bought by their corporation. Carl said sarcastically, It's good news for the city. Well, not for Greendale though. Richie said, If I were you, I'll be updating my resume. But it's lucky that I'm not you. Both of them laughed out loud as they left the dean behind. Pelton became flustered, and stormed into the room where Frankie and I were in. He said dramatically, I demand an explanation, Irk. He froze as he saw me, out of my disguise, sitting cross-legged on the chair while reading the Greendale student manual. The sun was hitting my face just right, making the scene ethereal for the dean. Hello, Craig. I greeted as I slowly moved my head towards him, using a deep, velvety voice. Nice to officially meet you. Hi. He greeted me back while avoiding looking directly at me. Oh my God, you're like the sun, I can't even look directly at you. That saddens me a little. I'd like people to be mesmerized, but never to look away. I said, faking sadness. The dean gasped and turned toward me immediately. I've spoken wrongly. It's not the sun. It's the panoramic view of an incredibly beautiful place. Even if you were the sun, then I'll risk getting blind even if it meant I can catch a glimpse at your beauty. Frankie's eyes twitched and she muttered, "What kind of play is this? Dean, please stop feeding into his ego. Edward, stop trying to get your ego fed. It was bruised yesterday. I need to appease it." I replied jokingly. Dean Pelton was angry on my behalf. Who dares await? I'm really getting absorbed in this. Can someone explain to me what happened in this room? I stood up and said casually, "It's simple, Craig. Can I call you Craig?" His eyes became dazed at my question and he muttered, "You can call me anything you like." While chuckling, I patted the dean's shoulder, which made him feel intoxicated from the touch. "It's simple, Craig. We just bought Greendale." He nodded, "Yes, yes. You just bought." "I'm sorry, what? You just bought the college?" He brushed off my hand and said anxiously, "Why did no one tell me about this? And what are your plans? Are you going to fire me?" I have given this school all of my sweat, tears, blood, and hair. I raised my hand up in front of his face, which made him stop rating abruptly. I explained, "Don't worry, Craig. We're on the same side here. And your job is safe. The school is also safe. It's just under new management from now on." Starting off my explanation with words of reassurance, Dean Pelton was calmed down. He asked, "What happened? And why did the city rep ask me to update my resume?" Frankie chimed in and said, "The school board may have sold the institution to us because we have scared them into believing the school has a major liability issue, and we will close the college on their behalf. That way, they can avoid the backlash in shutting it down themselves. Not that I'm saying the school doesn't have liability issues, but we were not planning to do that at all. Most of what we negotiated with the city was just a technique to drive the price of the school down. That way, we can keep most of the budget to make improvements on the school." I added. "And why would you do that?" Dean Pelton asked. Frankie took out a copy of the late Russell Borkert's will and gave it to the dean. As he read it, he muttered, "The founder?" "Yes." Frankie replied casually. "Someone found his body and inherited his deeds to the college, so that party felt responsible in helping Greendale be better. We were just helping him achieve that." The dean suddenly broke into tears and said, "Oh my God, my dream of turning this place into something with value will finally be true." He turned and tried to hug me, but Frankie grabbed him by the collar and pulled him away. The dean said excitedly, "We should announce this to the students." "About that, Craig, can you wait until the end of the picnic to do that?" Frankie suddenly said. I was confused but kept my silence. Craig asked Frankie, "Why do you want to do that? Isn't it better to give the good news now?" "Because there will be an uproar, and I want him to enjoy his vacation here a little bit longer," Frankie said as she glanced at me. Craig got the hint and said, "Got it. But he will be going on the stage later." "No, technically, he is never here. Only me, the company's representative, is here. No one else, other than a certain study group, should know that he's here. Do you understand that?" Frankie said sternly. Craig gulped his saliva and asked fearfully, "Just curious, what would the hierarchy of the school look like right now? And I still the dean, do I keep the same job responsibility?" Frankie said seriously while using hand gestures, "Right now, he is at the top of the food chain." She pointed at me before pointing at the dean, "You're just a guppy in the small pond, right down at the bottom. You'll do what we need you to do, and you don't try to do what you want to do, without consulting us, do you understand? Frankie, intimidation like that won't work on him because I'm pretty sure he's a bottom." I joked. Dean Pelton pushed his glasses up and whispered, "I can alternate." Frankie. "Come on, let's go to college. I want to see how you'll handle Chang. FYI, he will accuse you of being a racist when you try to make him present his qualifications," I said as I urged Frankie and the dean to walk out of the room. "It is racist, right?" the dean asked in confusion. "It's not. It's really not." Frankie shook her head disappointedly as she understood why Chang managed to get the job in the first place. She turned to me and said, "Are you sure we're going to keep him as the dean?" It won't be Greendale without Craig Pelton," I muttered dismissively, which made the dean feel validated for his efforts. "Oh, thank you." I tried the best I could. As we were leaving the room, Frankie suddenly stopped me and said, "Remember what we talked about last night?" I sighed and said, "Yeah. I do. It's kinda hard to forget." Frankie nodded in satisfaction and simplified, "So, our agreement is, I help you with managing the school, and you pick someone to go on a date with for the picnic. You don't have to take her home. You don't even have to kiss her. Just a simple date." I smirked and said hintingly, "But if she wants to?" "No," Frankie interjected decisively. "One simple date. That's it. In Greendale's administration." "Oh. So you think a Chinese man couldn't teach Spanish? You think that a Chinese man can only teach Chinese or math?" Chang accused Frankie the second she called him to the office. I watched the showdown from afar, with Abed standing beside me, and both of us ate popcorn at the same time. I was in disguise again, this time wearing a black leather jacket and a baseball cap with 2 silver rings along the edge. "He got her on the ropes," Abed commented. "Not really." I dismissed him. Chang continued using his loud voice to attract people, wanting to use shame and self-consciousness to pressure Frankie into stopping what she was doing. "So I'll just assume that you don't have a teaching certificate." That made my job easier. Failure to present your certificate could be constituted as fraud, and the school could sue you back for the salaries that were given to you. After that, you'll be thrown to jail. Frankie added casually, which made the crowd gasp. Chang was stunned for a bit and his voice became tiny. "What?" Frankie continued, "Of course, if you can show me your teaching certificate, or even just tell me where you got your certificate from so that I can cross-reference it, then you can avoid that outcome." Chang was silent for a while. Abed said while popping popcorn kernels into his mouth, "The tension is palpable. He tried to fight iron armor using a stick. He doesn't even have a fighting chance." I commented as I did the same thing. "So will he be arrested?" Abed asked. "No, most likely, he's going to run away," I commented. The second I finished speaking, Chang turned his back to Frankie and ran from the school as fast as he could. "See?" I said casually. Abed gave me a thumbs up before asking, "Want to go see what's going on with Jeff?" He finally accepted his fate that he's broke. Right now, he's like Goldie Hawn. "So he's fallen off a boat?" I asked. Abed nodded and said, "It's a defining moment in his character arc. I don't think Jeff will get amnesia and a poor blue-collar woman will trick him into thinking that he was her husband." I commented jokingly. In the movie, Goldie Hawn is a woman, and the opposite happens. Abed widened his eyes for a bit before he chuckled. I was referring to the personality change she has after realizing there's more to life than just being rich. But now, I'm wondering if that's going to happen too. "Should we set it up?" I asked. "I'll get the pan. You hit Jeff in the head with it," Abed replied decisively. After stopping Abed and explaining that it was a joke, Abed brought me to the cafeteria where I saw Annie giving a picnic blanket to Troy. Annie sacrificed her family heirloom in order for Troy to go to the picnic event with someone else, even though she has a crush on him. Abed turned to me and said, "This time, Annie can finally meet you. Before that, I have a question." "Shoot." I agreed easily. Abed asked, "You were poor before you became rich. Do you find that your lifestyle has changed when you have more money?" I thought about it for a second and replied, "Before my debut, I have to calculate the exact numbers of items before I bring them to the checkout to make sure I have enough money. I have to be creative and calculating to survive. But now, whenever I have a problem, I just feel the easiest way to handle it is to throw money at it." "So your personality changed a little when you became famous?" Abed questioned. I nodded slightly and said, "Just a little bit though. Most of my friends always say that I'm a money grubber." "Okay." Abed nodded. Sitting on the cafeteria table alone, Troy became elated. A picnic blanket? Genius. I was gonna lay down some newspaper. Annie giggled as she saw Troy's reaction and explained, "It's the blanket my grandmother used to court my grandfather." She tried to hint at him, but Troy was oblivious. Shirley shook her head in disapproval while standing behind Annie. "Yeah? That's pretty hot." Troy looked at the blanket and commented, which made Annie and Shirley confused for a second. "Thanks. I'm going to go find Randy," he said as he smiled and walked away. Annie looked at him longingly and said, "Why, you're welcome." She stood there all jittery, which caught my attention. Shirley scolded, "Tell that boy how you feel." "It's scary," she exclaimed. "If he's not interested, I could lose the friendship too," she told Shirley. I suddenly turned to Abed and said, "Abed, why is she so cute?" Abed widened his eyes, and he looked at Annie. Shirley tried to convince Annie, "You coulda love is a gamble always. But waiting won't change the dice, you either roll them or lose your turn." Annie anxiously jittered up and down, "I'm going to roll them. I am. I need a few more shakes." She held her hand on her crotch level, and pretended to shake the dice. However, it seemed quite inappropriate. "Shake 'em in your mind, okay?" Shirley commented while looking at Annie with disbelief. "Abed, can you call your dude friend for me first?" I asked after I finished watching everything. "Sure." Abed replied before he shouted, "Troy." Troy, who was walking away, saw Abed and walked towards the both of us. "Hey Abed." "Sorry, I can't talk for long." Troy widened his eyes, and his face froze as he realized who I was. "Edward, meet Troy Barnes." Abed introduces us. "Your name is Troy Barnes?" "One of my best friend's names is Barnes Troy. He loves to dance." I chuckled as I offered my hand to Troy for a handshake, but he was still frozen and kept staring at me with unblinking eyes. Confused for a second, I mumbled to myself, "Why is he like this? I'm not Kunta Kinte." "Troy, let's cut to the chase. Here's $200. You can buy a new picnic blanket with the money, maybe even get a gift for your date," I said as I handed him the $200. However, Troy didn't react. Abed was confused and tried to make the trade happen by tugging at the blanket, but it was immovable. Troy kept holding onto the blanket tight despite not moving his arm, so I explained, "If you're worried about giving this blanket to me because of Annie, you can be at ease because I actually want to ask her to be my date to the picnic and sing along under the stars." Abed supported me, "Yes, Troy. She seems like she's reluctant to part way with the picnic blanket. It's better to take the money and buy a new one." Troy's fingers slowly moved, and Abed managed to yank the blanket away from him. I grabbed his hand and placed the money into his palm, shaking his hand at the same time. "Thank you, Troy. I hope that you'll have a great time with your date." Annie and Shirley heard Abed shout when he was calling Troy, so they saw the whole thing. "Huh? Why is Abed taking the blanket from Troy?" Annie muttered with a slight dissatisfaction. Shirley said, "He must have noticed that you don't actually want to give the blanket to him. Even Abed has more courage to do the right thing than you do." Annie shook her head as she looked at my figure. "No, it seems like he's selling it to that guy. He's coming over here." She grabbed Shirley's arm anxiously and glared at Abed. "Why did you take the blanket back from Troy? You need to ask him, and by the way, Annie, don't shout," Abed said. I smiled as I pushed my cap upward, revealing my face to Annie. "Hello, ladies. I heard that you want to meet me?" Annie and Shirley froze for a second. Annie looked at Abed with disbelief, and Abed chuckled. "I know I said he's not coming back, but I actually lied to surprise you. You were depressed last night for nothing." Shirley reacted first while Annie was still dumbfounded. Shirley whispered excitedly, "Hello. I thought that we already missed the opportunity to meet you. My sons are your biggest fans." "Biggest?" I was wondering who's going to be my biggest fan. I kept telling myself that if I ever find them, then I'll give them a present. "It seems like the present is meant for your son." Shirley squealed and said, "Oh, that's so nice." Abed interrupted and said, "Shirley, the present's not going anywhere. Right now, Edward is trying to ask Annie out on a date, so we should let him do that first." "What?" both Annie and Shirley exclaimed at the same time. Annie was nervous, but Shirley was filled with excitement. I grimaced as I turned to Abed. "You shouldn't have said that." Abed thought about what he did wrong and said, "Sorry, I spoiled things." "Annie, pretend you didn't hear anything I just said." Annie breathed heavily as I moved closer to her. "Hi, sorry if this may seem too forward for me, but I think you're really cute. Would you like to go to the picnic with me?" Abed showed her the picnic blanket, in which she connected everything inside her head. She lowered her gaze bashfully and twirled her hair. You think I'm cute?" "Very," I replied honestly. Despite her wearing a grandma-style sweater and blouse, even those grandma shoes, I couldn't deny that she was incredibly attractive. Maybe Frankie and the others were right. Maybe I do have a type. I received a text, which its chime interrupted the moment. I looked at Annie and asked, "So, what do you say? Do you want to go on a secret date with me?" Annie staggered and Shirley had to keep her steady. "My head feels dizzy. I can't believe this is really happening," she said. Shirley grinned and said, "Me too." Abed chimed in with an explanation. He couldn't reveal his identity because he wants to experience a true college life. "So you have to go on an undercover date." "Thanks for the exposition," I replied to Abed. He pointed his finger at me, gesturing, "I got you." Annie hesitated for a second, and said, "Don't you have a girlfriend?" "I have a strictly professional relationship with Taylor," I replied instantly, and my phone chimed again at the time. In fact, it chimed continuously, completely breaking the immersiveness of me asking Annie out. Annie said with a slight blush, I don't know." "She'll go with you." Shirley interrupted on her behalf and pushed Annie away. "She'll meet you on the east lawn at 5. Shirley said as she dragged Annie away. Annie retorted, "Shirley." Shirley said with gritted teeth, "Don't be an idiot, Annie. I know what you wanted to say." "I was going to say yes," Annie replied. Shirley said admonishingly, "Good. But still, we definitely have a lot of work to do. You need a completely new wardrobe for the date. You definitely can't go looking like this." I checked my phone and realized that the message was from Dylan. "Abed, I'm sorry, it seems like my friend's in trouble. You can go meet with him. I need to find Britta. She has disappeared since yesterday in her search to find the monkey, and I feel like she needs some help. When you find her, tell her to give the monkey to my head of security, Mickey. He'll bring the monkey to the lab for testing." "Okay. We'll part ways to make way for the plot, but then, we'll reunite again at the episode's conclusion," Abed muttered. "Did you just break the fourth wall, Abed?" I chuckled before we went our separate ways. Music room. Dylan and his band members were practicing for the performance tonight when I entered the room. No, it still feels weird. Dylan stopped strumming his guitar before turning to his band members. His drummer said, "You can just sing that song again. You don't have to worry about what your girlfriend has to say." Dylan sighed and said, "That song made her cry. I don't want to see her like that again. She was so embarrassed last night. So I need to do something to make it right." "You basically told everyone you guys haven't had sex yet, and may imply that she's a virgin," his bassist said. "Why did she even cry from that?" "Maybe the pregnancy hormones are messing with her head," his pianist chimed in. "She's pregnant?" The bassist and the drummer were shocked. Dylan finally saw me and said, "Hey, Edward. You're here. I'm in trouble. I already have the lyrics of the songs, but we cannot nail the melody. Something feels weird. Can you help?" He handed me the music sheet, and I was dumbfounded when I read the lyrics. "So, you're trying to appease your fiancé by singing this?" "Yeah, this is the exact opposite of what I sang before." Dylan replied innocently. I furrowed my eyebrows, and then I sighed after seeing his determined expression. Alright, I'll help. But no one should know I have anything to do with the song. Ever. Chapter 274, Picnic and Sing Along. General POV. Abed walked to the study room where everyone had gathered and greeted his friend group casually. Hello. So Spanish class is cancelled. You guys know that, right? He sat at his spot beside Britta, who has an unkempt hair, some twigs on her hair, prominent eye bags, and her eyes were a bit reddish. Shirley said, I heard Chang is fired. She turned to Abed and greeted weirdly, Hey Abed. I'm happy to see you before I finally lose my mind. Jeff had some stubble on his face, and he wore only a gray shirt and shorts, a stark difference compared to his usual fashionable style. Still haven't found the monkey? Jeff asked Britta. Britta shook her head and said, the guy I gave him for rescue had sold the monkey. Then, the store that bought it lost it. I went searching in that area for a while, but I couldn't find it. Annie said gleefully, full of energy, Britta. Don't lose hope. You're going to find the monkey. Britta scoffed and said disdainfully, what is she all smiling about? Shirley and Annie looked at each other before they squealed and giggled with each other. All the while, Troy was staring at Annie, trying to figure out something. Pierce turned to Britta and suddenly said, Brittles, I'm sure you've already heard about it, but I had a falling out with Vaughn, and now I've left the band. Britta and Abed were intrigued, while the rest just listened. Britta said, right, the band and the offensive song. Jeff, you used to be a lawyer. Can I kill Pierce and blame it on my madness? Jeff scoffed and scooted away from Britta for a few inches. You actually can. Great. Britta smiled coldly at Pierce. Annie asked the old man, Pierce, why did you break up with the band? We have a disagreement about the song. Pierce replied. In actuality, Pierce and Vaughn fought because Vaughn kept referring to the song as his song instead of giving Pierce some credit. Pierce thought he was going to Garfunkel him, and they had a falling down. Britta, however, misunderstood the situation and exclaimed sweetly, Oh Pierce. Were you standing up for my honor? That's so sweet. Pierce was taken aback. What? Yes, we broke up because I was defending your honor. Abed commented, seems unlikely. But, in more important news, Annie has got a date for the picnic. Shirley and Annie squealed while Britta, Jeff, and Pierce exclaimed supportingly. So, who's the guy? Britta asked while holding the table and leaning into Annie. Abed replied, everyone here knows the guy. Troy, who was keeping silence suddenly said, I'm really curious on why he asked Annie out from the rest of the students. Who? Jeff asked in confusion. Troy turned to him and said, Newgate. Britta and Jeff were shocked. What? Pierce turned to Annie and chuckled, you agreed to go on a date with a mountain climber? Annie's eyes moved around as she replied shyly, I also don't know why he picked me. Abed suddenly chimed in, I know. He said you're cute. Annie and Shirley squealed again while Troy mumbled while scrutinizing Annie's face, I don't see it. Really? Jeff leaned forward, fully interested in the topic. He turned to Annie and said, when you start dating a millionaire, please don't forget about us. Especially don't forget about me. We're not dating. We're just going out on a picnic together. Annie replied innocently. Shirley added with a giggle, I'm bringing Annie out shopping. Her sweet voice turned serious as she said, this is a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I cannot let her go like this. What's wrong with the way I dress? Annie retorted. Abed commented, you look like a spinster librarian. Annie gasped in shock, her eyes fluttering, but never fully closed. Abed pointed out, there it is. The Disney princess look. Britta scoffed and said, guys, instead of pushing her to go out with him, we need to make sure to protect Annie. Men with power and fame like that? He'll probably just throw her away when he's done with her. Whoa! Everyone groaned as they turned to Britta. Annie snapped, you don't get to talk about him like that, especially when he was trying to help you. Britta realized she had misspoke. No, I wasn't specifying him. Abed pointed his finger at Britta and said, he might have a complicated past, but he's a good man. Jeff added, he gave the gift of great songs and multiple other things to the world. Troy continued, shame on you for even thinking about that. Britta was agitated, why are you all talking like you knew him intimately? None of you know what he's really like. Abed raised his hand, I do. We bonded quite a lot. Britta turned to him and said with a shaky voice, well, he could still be faking it. Jeff scoffed and said, I don't think he is. Think about it, Britta. He's the kind of guy that can have any girl he wants. Unless he was really interested in Annie, he wouldn't ask her out. Jeff. Annie was flattered. He turned to Annie and said, then, when you do start to go out, you can, I don't know, talk to him and see if his legal team needs to hire a consultant or any other high-paying position. Something that is in Colorado will be nice. Britta snapped, you just want to prostitute Annie to get what you want. Jeff argued back, what I want is to liquidate my asset and get back my condo, but turns out, my comic book is worthless. What? Britta was taken aback, and became confused. Pierce teased Jeff, what happened about not taking any charity? That thing was gone the second I had to use the communal toilet in the college dorm this morning. Jeff retorted. Abed suddenly chimed in, if Jeff wants to prostitute Annie, and Shirley wants to take her shopping, then I can come with you guys and we can make a Pretty Woman spoof. Troy was intrigued and he stopped trying to study Annie, oh I love that movie. Me too. Shirley joined in. Annie also said, so do I. Of course, the only one who didn't like it was still Britta. What? I just think that it mirrored the real-world society where a woman's value could only be determined by. All the others stood up from their chairs and left the room before Britta could finish. While they were walking out, Shirley asked, Abed, I haven't gotten to the ATM yet. Do you have any cash to use for Annie's shopping? I want to avoid the traffic and go directly to the store. Abed nodded and said, I have about $20,000. Oh, that's nice. Shirley's sweet voice turned serious. You have how much now? The cool evening air was filled with anticipation as college students gathered for the annual picnic and sing-along under the stars outdoor student concert. As the stage at East Lawn was brightly lit and ready for the upcoming performances, the majority of the students had foregone elaborate picnic spreads, opting instead to simply claim their spots on the grass with blankets and the occasional shared bag of chips or sandwiches. Couples cuddled closely, stealing glances at each other as they chatted and laughed, more interested in each other's company than an elaborate meal. The sound of tuning instruments and excited chatter created a lively atmosphere, as students staked out their places close to the stage, eager for the concert to begin under the twinkling night sky above. Troy had secured a spot near the concert stage, accompanied by his date Randy, an Asian student with tan skin. Are you cold, Troy? Randy asked him. No, you can use the blanket. I bought 10 of them for the picnic. Tell me if it's not enough and I'll get you some more, Troy replied, though his eyes were intently scanning the crowd, searching for the figures of Annie and Edward. Suddenly, Troy spotted them. Annie was dressed up, wearing a short skirt and a frilly blouse with transparent sleeves, her hair blown out, and she was carrying a purse instead of her usual backpack. To Troy's surprise, he watched as Edward kissed the back of Annie's hand and presented her with a red rose. Annie giggled, and the two of them then made their way to a VIP section where 6 burly men had reserved seating. Oh my God, they really did go on a date, Troy murmured to himself, his brow furrowed in confusion. How can Annie go on a date with him, unless he thinks Annie is hot? If he thinks Annie is hot, then I need to think Annie is hot too. Wait a second. Is Annie actually hot? Troy's internal monologue was interrupted when Randy caught him staring at Annie. Are you seriously checking out other women right now while on a date with me? She demanded, clearly upset. What? Oh, no. That's my friend, Troy tried to explain, but it was too late. Randy grunted and stood up from the picnic mat, walking away. Randy. No. Troy called out desperately, but Randy refused to look back. Edward led Annie to the picnic mat, which stood out from the rest of the casual arrangements around them. Their spot was meticulously set up, with a red and white checkered blanket, a wooden basket filled with an assortment of foods, a candle in a glass jar, and even a vase to display the red rose Edward had just gifted to Annie. "Oh my God, they really did go all out in setting the place up," Edward muttered with disbelief as he looked around to catch who was responsible for it. That's when he spotted Frankie and the dean, hiding behind a tree and giving him a thumbs up. Edward chuckled at Frankie and the dean's obvious meddling. He turned to Annie and said, "Have a seat, my lady." Annie couldn't help but break into a smile, even though that's what she had been doing the entire evening. "Thank you, Prince," she started, then quickly stopped herself. "Wait, that's pretty awkward." Edward laughed a few times before saying, "It's fine. I like it." "Don't repeat that, but I like it," he said jokingly, which made Annie feel he was easy to get along with. Annie sat with her legs folded sideways, leaning towards Edward on her left, while Edward sat with his legs straight, propping himself to sit upright with his back hand on the ground. They glanced at each other a couple times, and then burst into laughter when they caught each other's eyes. Edward broke the silence and said, "There's still time before the concert starts. Why don't we get to know each other while we eat?" Okay. Annie replied bashfully. "So Annie, tell me, why did a smart girl like you, in a place like this?" Edward asked as he poured a glass of sparkling cider to her. Annie was a bit taken aback and stammered, "Oh. Edward added, "Don't worry, I'm not trying to judge. I'm just curious. You don't have to answer me if you don't want to." Annie looked at Edward with bewilderment before fixing her hair and said, No. I think I can answer it. In high school, I'm a 4.0, a good student. But something happened before I could take the SATs and graduate. So I'm stuck here." Edward knew about the Annie Adderall incident where she got addicted to pills from the intense pressure to succeed, got into a breaking point at a party, and then smashed her face on the glass window when trying to run away from said party. Having had constructive surgery and gone into rehab, she's slowly trying to build her life back up by coming into Greendale, the only college she could afford to go to right now. "Oh yeah? That sucks." Edward listened attentively. "Did you take your GED?" he asked. Annie nodded and said, "Yeah, I did. That's why I managed to come here." She giggled nervously. Edward chuckled and asked, "Are you from around here, Annie?" "My family moved here when I was a kid, and I've been staying here since," Annie replied. They got to know each other for a while and were finally comfortable around each other. After a few jokes and laughter, Annie's eyes glittered and she asked excitedly, "What about you? Why are you here?" "I'm here for a visit actually. And I also bought the college," Edward replied honestly. Annie's face froze for a minute before she asked, "What did you just say?" Edward smirked and ate a strawberry. "Maybe it's a habit, or maybe I just like broken things. But when I saw the condition of the school, and how little it'll actually take to fix it, I have to try it out." "Wait, this is for real? You actually bought the place I'm studying at?" Annie asked in bewilderment. "Why don't any of us know anything about it?" "Well, Annie, there's this quote, upset the established order, and everything becomes chaos. That's why I did everything under wraps, and only announced it when it was done." "To prevent chaos?" Annie was confused. Edward smirked and grabbed her chin lightly, making her heart flutter as they locked eyes together. Edward mumbled teasingly, "To own you?" Annie moaned intoxicatedly before she became flabbergasted, "WHI?" Edward released his hand and said while laughing, "I was joking. You don't have to be so nervous." "HMMP," she grunted while blushing. Edward flirted, "Despite your adorableness, I wouldn't spend millions into buying a college just because I want you. I can do that without." Annie flirted back, pretending to be mad, "Are you saying I'm easy?" Edward grinned and said, "No. I'm just saying that you're not that type of girl that will be blinded by money." "Really? You didn't even know me until today." Annie was quite shy and she lowered her head to avoid Edward's gaze. "Who knows if that'll work on me or not?" "Wait, I can do that. Edward teased. Why are we even here on a date then? While they were having a good time, on the side of the lawn, Abed, Troy and Shirley were watching them by using binoculars. Abed commented, "Look, they are holding hands." Shirley squealed, "Oh, that's nice." Troy said unwillingly, "She's just brushing the crumbs that had fallen off on him." The performances finally began, and the concert started with Vaughn, Britta's ex-boyfriend, singing a song called Pierce Your A.B. While they were singing it, Annie exclaimed in horror, "Oh God, the first song at my first concert date will be about an old man who shit his pants?" Edward chuckled, "Well, look on the bright side. The moment will be etched in your mind. There's no way you're going to forget it." Annie said, "Easy for you to say. You probably have a lot of memories like this, so you won't need to care." "Actually, this is my first time too," Edward said, which made Annie turn to him in surprise. "Your first?" she asked. "Not a first date, but a first concert with a girl. Usually, I'm the one on stage, so I never experienced it," Edward said. The atmosphere started heating up, and Dylan finally walked up to the stage. He said to the microphone, "Baby, I'm sorry about yesterday's song. I'm going to make it up to you." Anais, who was sitting there on the picnic mat alone, was dumbfounded. "Oh no, what did he have planned now? Imagine me naked at Dylan Modern Family." The soft rock melody captured the attention of the crowd. The retro band style made Edward chortle for a bit, then he held Annie's hand, interlocking their fingers together. Her heart beat quickly, and her eyes fluttered as she stole a glance at him. Dylan sang,
"I'm a ship without a rudder, I'm the bread without your butter, and I'll never find another girl who could make me feel so fine. So here's my broken
Sweet of Mine." The start of the song subverted the crowd's expectations, but then Dylan sang the chorus.
Imagine me naked, I imagine you nude. You'll never have to fake it, like you do with other dudes.
The crowd burst into cheers. Even Anais was helpless and was captivated by how sincere Dylan was singing the song.
I'll never stop touching you, even when the world ends. But for now I'm lying naked, without my best friend.
Dylan pointed at Anais again, but this time, she smiled instead of being dumbfounded like before. After a short guitar solo, Dylan continued.
When it seems the world is cold and dark, and you can't remember where you parked, if you help me build this golden ark, we can sail upon the sea and get educated.
Annie and Edward found themselves to be locking eyes with each other as the chorus arrived.
Imagine me naked.
Annie chuckled nervously and told Edward, "The song's pretty funny."
I imagine you nude.
Edward replied, "It really does." Both of them were leaning into each other.
You'll never have to fake it, like you do with other dudes. I'll never stop touching you, even with the world ends. But for now I'm lying naked, without my best friend. Without my best friend.
As the guitar solo began, Dylan did a monologue.
If you imagine me naked, I can bring you to a world that you have never believed in. If you believe in me, then I can believe in you, and we can go far, far into outer space."
The concert was at its peak. People stood up from their mat and sang along to the song.
Imagine me naked, I'll imagine you nude. You'll never have to fake it, like you do with other dudes. I'll never stop touching you, even when the world ends. But
Dylan continued solo, singing with a very emotional tone.
I imagine you you'll never have to fake it. Like you do with other dudes. I'll never stop touching you, even when the world ends. But for now I'm lying naked without my best friend.
The music slowly fades away, and the entire crowd cheered. Suddenly, Dean Pelton walked onto the stage, causing the crowd to groan. The dean still laughed, acting like the crowd had celebrated him, took the microphone from Dylan and said, "Incredible performance by, what's your band name again?" "We're the Dropouts." Dylan replied. "Incredible performances by the Dropouts," the dean announced dramatically, which made the crowd cheered and applauded for Dylan's band once again. The dean chuckled twice and said, "With that, ends the concert for tonight." The crowd clamored, and the band who hadn't gone yet protested, "What are you doing?" The dean calmed himself down and said, I know. You're mad. But this is for your safety. Alright, I'll give you some good news after this bad news, so listen first." The crowd calmed down a bit, but were still listless. Dean Pelton said, "We need to evacuate everyone from the compound as there's some gas leaks in campus. Everyone who stays in the dorms also has to move out as soon as possible." Abed was startled when he heard it. "Where should we go?" Jeff muttered with some anger. "All right, calm down," the dean shouted. "It's a precaution. You can move back in after 2 or 3 days to the dorms." "Alright, so for the good news, the school will no longer be under city management as we have been bought out by a huge corporation." He announced it excitedly, but none of the crowd reacted. "Hello?" The dean was confused. "Did you guys hear me?" "Boo!" The crowd threw food, bottles, and even grass to the dean. "What?" he exclaimed in surprise. "It's good news," he said tearfully. "Boo! Down with the corporation! Down with the machine!" The college students shouted, and a riot ensued. "Ow! Ow! Protect me, Jeffrey! Protect me, Eddie!" the dean shouted urgently as he avoided the things thrown at him. However, Edward's picnic mat had long since been empty, even before Dylan finished his performance. Chapter 275, Annie's Boob. The Monkey. Edward POV. Annie and I had left the picnic in the middle of Dylan's performance. My guard had discreetly notified me about the gas leak and stealthily escorted us away from the crowd. As it turned out, it was the right move, considering the riot that soon erupted. "You predicted this," Annie murmured with awe as we walked to my car. She turned to me with confusion. "Why did you still let the dean tell them if you know this is going to happen?" I turned to Annie and smirked. "I didn't let him. He went AWOL. Now, he's paying the price." Annie's eyes widened, and she asked, "Are you going to save him?" "No need. Frankie is there. She'll know what to do," I replied casually. "Let's get out of here." "I'll drive you home," I offered. Annie wanted to come along, but suddenly she remembered something. "Wait. There's no need for that. I can go home by myself." "You don't have to. If this is about your apartment located above the Dildopolis store, then you don't have to worry," I interjected with a chuckle before I slowly grabbed her hand. Annie muttered with self-depreciation, "So, you already know? Why? Do you think I'll look down on you or something?" "On the contrary, I thought you're really brave to risk living in that neighborhood to continue your education. I admire you for doing that." Annie blushed and said, "You really know how to make a girl fall in love." "Yet, I cannot make you fall in love with me," I quipped, which made Annie widen her eyes for a bit before she let out a short yelp as I pulled her hand to walk to the car. In that short moment, I saw it clearly. The way she was looking at me, it was a gaze of limerence and infatuated, idealized adoration that had little to do with who I truly was. She had constructed a preconceived impression of me in her mind, elevating me to a pedestal of her own making. I realized then that we could never truly connect, well, not on the first date. I couldn't help but acknowledge the power I held over her. I was certain I could manipulate her, get her to do anything I wanted. But, if I did, then I'll just be the same as the other star who slept around with their groupies. As that realization dawned on me, I felt a deep sense of unease. Would I really stoop to taking advantage of this naive girl, whose most fervent wish was simply to hold hands with a boyfriend at Disneyland? To turn her into a momentary diversion, a one-night stand? Edward? She called, snapping me out from my thoughts. Oh, sorry, I was thinking about this college. I said before I asked, Annie, do you have any specific complaints about this place? Part of which you think can be better? Her eyes lit up. You want to hear my thoughts about it? Sure. If I need to ask someone, then who'll be better to ask than the students that go here? I drove the black Nissan Xterra SUV to Annie's neighborhood. Annie became a bit nervous as we were heading to her house. You shouldn't park here long. Go home immediately after dropping me off, she advised with a slight panic. I patted her hand to calm her down and said, don't worry. There's literally a convoy following me from behind. Check the side mirror. Annie was confused, and then she saw two SUVs protecting my car. The once vibrant commercial district had fallen on hard times. Vacant storefronts dotted the landscape, their dusty neon signs flickering feebly in the gathering dusk. Unkempt lots were littered with the detritus of foreclosure, broken glass, rusted shopping carts, abandoned furniture. In the distance, a small fire burned in a metal drum as homeless individuals sought shelter from the late fall chill. Amid the decay, a single neon sign stood out, the bright glow of Dildopolis drawing the eye. Adult toys were hung by the store glass, like they were butcher's meat. I asked Annie with disbelief as I stopped the car in front of the store, you really live here? Annie lowered her head and said, this place seems a little bit better in the morning. Also, the rent is very cheap. By the way, mind if I see your place? I asked her politely. She blushed and said, it's only the first date. I don't think it's appropriate. Ah, this isn't part of the date. The date ended when the gas leak happened. I said. Annie jolted in surprise, what? It is over? I nodded and said, yes. So, can I get up there or not? Annie hesitated for a bit before she said, okay then. Just, for 5 minutes, okay? Okay. Don't worry. I'm a gentleman. I smiled charmingly, which made her cute stern face crumble. The studio apartment was even smaller than I had anticipated, barely 150 square feet. Annie had done her best to make the limited space feel cozy, but the cramped quarters were immediately apparent. Her bathroom was also really cramped as it could barely fit a toilet and a shower there. So, do you have to sit on the toilet to take a shower? I asked with disbelief. Annie blushed in embarrassment and hurried to close the toilet door. Why are you looking at a girl's bathroom the minute you enter? I chuckled and said, 'Cause I could see your entire house in less than a minute. You know what, Annie, she unawarely stood close to me as she closed the toilet door, and I leaned in closer to her. She hesitated a bit before she closed her eyes and pursed her lips, expecting a kiss. But, I grabbed her shoulders and said, I have a proposition for you. What? She asked in confusion as she opened her eyes again. Suddenly, a gunshot fired over in the distance. Annie was startled and she abruptly hugged me. I asked, does that usually happen? Annie begrudgingly replied, yeah. She realized that she was hugging me, blushed, and then released her embrace. What preposition? She asked while fixing her hair. This might bruise your ego a bit, but listen to me first. I said. I have property here, so why don't you move there? Sorry, I know you mean well, but I'm not looking for handouts. Annie said seriously. I chuckled and said, I'm not finished. I need a building manager to manage the property. Annie furrowed her eyebrows and said, I know that you mean well, Edward. But, I really don't need a handout. I chuckled again and said, like I said. It's a job. Not a handout. I walked to her bed and sat on the edge. Then, I patted the spot in front of me, gesturing for her to sit. Despite her nervousness, she walked and sat in front of me. "Annie, do you know how I got discovered?" I asked. Her eyes lit up as she replied, "I watched all of your interviews. You were singing at a cafe, right? Then, you meet your CEO. Actually, I was shopping with him before that," I said coyly. "You know, I might never become who I am now if he doesn't offer me some help." His little act of throwing my name around the industry, landing me to open Taylor's concert, all changed my life greatly. I held my hand to her. "I know that you might feel humiliated in taking the help, or you might feel like you don't want to owe me anything, but, Annie, take the chance." Like I did. Holding someone's hand at the start, didn't we used to do that too, when we were learning to walk? There's no shame in it. Annie widened her eyes and she fell into deep thoughts. I gave her some time to process it, and finally, she asked, "What does a building manager do?" "We'll talk on our way to the apartment," I said before I stood up and walked to the window. Opening it abruptly, I whistled with my fingers, calling my bodyguards up to the apartment. Annie was startled for a second. What are you doing?" "Calling your movers," I replied with a smirk. General POV. Back at the chaotic Greendale campus, Dean Pelton found himself in the crosshairs of the angry student body, flinching as various objects were hurled in his direction. Amidst the din, a lone figure emerged from the wings, flanked by a pair of imposing bodyguards. Francesca Dart strode purposefully towards the center of the stage, a high-powered megaphone clutched firmly in her hand. With a decisive motion, she snatched up the hanging microphone, positioning the megaphone directly behind it. The students' jeers and projectiles momentarily ceased as a deafening siren blast tore through the air, causing the crowd to clap their hands over their ears in pained surprise. As the reverberations faded, Francesca leaned into the microphone, her cool gaze sweeping across the now silent assembly. "Thank you for quieting down," she stated, her voice carrying an authoritative edge. "My name is Francesca Dart, and I'm here to address your concerns. To be clear, we don't have much time, and those who stayed in the dorms need to evacuate quickly, so I'm making it short," she added. "First of all, Greendale has been bought by Entertain. Or as you might know it, the company is run by the prominent public figure, celebrity, and genius, Edward Newgate," Frankie said, which made half of the crowd widen their eyes in disbelief before they cheered in excitement. Frankie continued, "As for why he did that? It's not that he's bored, but he wanted to save the school. Greendale is bankrupt. It's bleeding money. It has too many liabilities. So the city is getting rid of it." The crowd gasped in disbelief. Some even shouted, "Are you closing the school down?" "On the contraire," Frankie replied. "Our CEO has a quirk, which is, he likes fixing broken things. Greendale is so bent out of shape that he can't help himself. To clarify a few things, there won't be much changes to your school fees." "Are you increasing it?" Troy shouted worriedly. Frankie heard it and replied, "No. Rather, we're going to lower the tuition by 20% and offer scholarships to excellent students." The crowd clamored in excitement. Frankie let them have their reactions before she continued, "You can find all of the changes when you go on the school website. Lastly, before we evacuate, the school would be closed during the reconstruction process. Since your classes hadn't ended yet, we will opt for an online examination instead for your final exams for this period of time so you won't lose your credits. That's all. Make sure to evacuate the premises following the firefighters' guidelines," Frankie said before she left with the bodyguards. The bruised and battered mentally, Dean Pelton picked up the microphone and shouted urgently, "What are you all waiting for? Leave this place. Now." Jeff and Abed stood side by side as they watched the crowd frantically dispersed. Jeff muttered, "Abed, what are we going to do now?" As they were living in the dorm, they had to find another place to stay for a couple of days. Abed turned to Jeff and said, "We can find an apartment together. Like in Friends. You'll be Joey, 'cause you always get the girl, and I'll be Chandler. Can I be any more sarcastic? Joey looked at Abed in disbelief and scoffed, at the very least I'm not Ross. We'll find a motel then. Abed nodded in agreement and wanted to follow Jeff before Troy, Shirley and Pierce joined them. Shirley said, "Can't you believe it? The school is going to be shut down." Pierce scoffed, "A company buying the school? What are they thinking about? If we're supposed to do that, then I'll buy the school. The ones running the company don't really know about business." Troy asked Pierce, "Why did you say that?" Pierce replied, "Running a school other than the Ivy Leagues will just make him bleed money." Abed said defensively, "That's not going to happen with Edward. His character trait is that he always fixes what he touches. He's like Midas, instead, he doesn't kill you." Jeff scoffed derisively and said, "Oh yeah? Then, how come I'm still broke?" Abed turned to him and said, "Edward doesn't really like you." Jeff widened his eyes and said depressively, "Really? PFF, I mean, I don't care." His voice cracked a bit at the last part. Britta suddenly popped out from the bushes and said, "Hey guys. Can you hide me for a sec?" She squeezed into the group, walking while hiding her figures from the firefighters they were passing by. Jeff asked with concern, "Britta, what did you do?" Britta replied, "Nothing. I definitely didn't release that monkey in school, and broke a pipeline trying to capture it back. In any case, I've already given the monkey to Edward's security, so they'll get it to the lab. It won't matter if I got bitten more by the monkey, right? Since I'm going to get the cure anyway?" All the others widened their eyes and stepped away from Britta instinctively. Abed suddenly got a text from Annie. He turned to Jeff and said, "Annie knows where we can live for a few days." "Where did she go?" Shirley asked in concern. Abed replied, "She's at Edward's apartment building. She gave me the address." Britta quickly grabbed the phone from Abed and read the text, "We should go there now. We need to take care of Annie." Jeff scoffed and said, "You just want to take care of the monkey business." Wow, this is the first time ever I have used monkey business in a sentence to mean its literal meaning. Troy supported Britta, "I think we should go too. I need to ask him why did he think Annie is hot." Pierce joined in, "And I want to ask him about mountain climbing." Abed was a little concerned and said, "I don't think we're supposed to do that." "Shut up, Abed." Jeff scolded. "I want to hear why he hates me." Britta snorted derisively and said, "Shouldn't that be clear by now? You kept wanting to get his money." "Hey! I tried to sell him a very precious comic book. It's not my fault he didn't see its value," Jeff retorted while pointing his finger at Britta. Britta tried to bite it, which shocked Jeff. "Have you gone insane, Britta?" he asked worriedly. Abed muttered as he watched the group walk away, "This is not good. We're supposed to end this on a good note so that he can become a recurring character." At the airport, Frankie looked at Edward in disbelief after they met each other in front of his private jet. "So, you guys went on a date?" Frankie rubbed her sore forehead as she recounted. "Yep," Edward replied casually. "It went well, and you even went back to her place." She continued. "Yeah." Edward nodded. "Then, explain it to me. How did it turn into a job interview?" Frankie asked in disbelief. Edward smirked and said, "I'll tell you on the plane." "Ah, by the way, you're coming to Wisconsin to meet your future in-laws, right?" "No, I'll be getting back to my place for Thanksgiving." "I won't be joining you," Frankie replied honestly. Edward said, "Ow, that's too bad. I wanted to see you and Dad fumbling around Grandma and Grandpa when they enthusiastically supported your relationship." Frankie smiled softly and said, "You think they will?" "Of course." Edward replied with an expression that said, "Wasn't that obvious?" Back to Edward's new building. After everyone arrived at Annie's new apartment, Britta went to sit on Edward's couch immediately as she felt lightheaded because she inhaled a lot of gas. Annie gleefully decorated the apartment with her stuff, which prompted Jeff to ask, "Annie, did you just move in here?" Annie excitedly replied, "Was it so obvious?" This used to be Edward's place to stay. You can still smell his scent here. Shirley looked at Annie with disbelief. That's disturbing. Annie immediately took a few gifts from the table and handed them to Shirley. That reminds me. Here. Ed. Hee, I call him Ed now. He asked me to give it to you. It's for your sons. With a sweet voice, Shirley exclaimed, That's nice. Pierce looked at the gifts and got a little jealous. What about me? Did he have anything for me? Jeff smirked and teased, Pierce, I don't think he even knows you. Everyone else all agreed with Pierce. Britta exclaimed sadly, What's the point of getting a gift? Annie, explain how you got the apartment? That's supposed to be the true question here. Pierce interjected, Wasn't it obvious? Annie is his mistress. What? Troy exclaimed in bewilderment. Annie was also surprised, and she reacted bashfully, Pierce, I'm not his mistress. I work with him. And how did you get the job? Jeff asked, intrigued. Annie hesitated a bit before she said, Convenience, I guess? He needs someone to handle the building for him and search for new tenants. Abed looked around the house before his attention went to a normal-looking rack near the wall. He noticed the small notch for the hidden compartment on the rack, but he didn't press it yet. He asked Annie, Hey, what's the criteria for renting a place here? He'll email me about the details later on. Annie replied innocently before she turned to Jeff, Edward also told me to pass on something to you. Oh yeah? Jeff replied sarcastically. He wants me to be his mistress too? Sorry, but I'm way more expensive than this apartment. I'm sorry, you have 3 rooms here? Annie nodded, yes. Also, he said that he auctioned off your comic book for you in the LA comic book fans community. That Amazing Spider-Man issue number 3, first appearance of Doc Ock, is quite valuable. Someone offered you $8,000 for it. Do you want to sell it? Sell. Jeff interjected quickly. I'm selling it. Annie replied innocently, acting as if she was Edward's secretary. You can send the book to the staff member going back to LA tonight. They are still here at the apartment, so you can just send it to them. What about the money? Jeff asked urgently. Annie replied, The money is also with them. Edward will pay for it first as he knows you are in urgent need of money. Jeff felt a bit guilty and muttered, I judged him wrongly. He's a great guy. Britta snapped, What about me? How is he going to deal with the monkey? While the others were afraid of Britta, Annie smiled softly and said, Britta, you had just gotten the monkey. Wait a few days. He told you that you won't be insane at the moment, right? Jeff then whispered to Annie. Annie widened her eyes and said, You got bitten again? That wraps up this part of What If Karmic Gacha System in Modern Family World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.